25,000 Romans destroyed 40,000 Macedonians at a place called Dog's Heads. Spring rain in Thessaly, heavy fog that swallows armies whole. 2 formations meet in the hills and one walks away. The other bleeds out over 1,600 meters of broken ground. This is Cynoscephalae, 197 BC, the day the Phalanx broke. Everyone knows the Phalanx. Alexander swept Persia with it. Rows of men 16 deep holding pikes 18 feet long. Sarissas, they called them. 5 layers of spear points bristling forward. You couldn't get close. On flat ground, the Phalanx was a machine that crushed everything. Philip II invented it in Macedonia around 360 BC using cornel wood from the northern forests. The sarissa weighed 9 pounds, held with both hands, 4/5 down the shaft. Each man carried a small shield called a pelta strapped to his left arm. No hands free for a big shield when you're gripping an 18-foot pike. The formation was tight. Men stood 3 feet apart in close order. When they locked together, the mass moved forward like a bronze wall with a forest of steel tips. Nobody could stand against it head-on. Not Greek hoplites with their 8-foot spears, not Persian infantry, not the tribes of India. For over a century, the Macedonian phalanx dominated every battlefield from the Balkans to the Indus River. But everyone forgets the other machine. The Roman legion. Not a solid block, a checkerboard. Small units called maniples, 120 men each, 3 lines deep, hastati in front, young troops, principes behind them, veterans, triarii in the back, the oldest fighters. Each maniple could move independently, turn, charge, retreat. Reform. The gaps between maniples were covered by the line behind. The Romans had been using this system since their wars against the Samnites in the Italian hills around 340 BC. Rough terrain, forests, valleys, places where a solid phalanx couldn't hold formation. So they broke their army into pieces, gave each centurion authority to lead his men. The individual Roman soldier had 6 feet of space to work in, enough room to throw his pilum, 2 javelins per man, 7 feet long, iron shank designed to bend on impact so the enemy couldn't throw them back. After the javelins came the gladius, short sword, Spanish design, 18 inches of steel, made for stabbing. Each legionary carried a scutum, curved shield 4 feet tall, covered his body from shoulder to knee. He could lock shields with the men beside him or fight alone if the formation scattered. 2 systems, 2 philosophies of war. The phalanx was mass and momentum. The legion was flexibility and initiative. They'd never really tested each other, not properly. Rome had been busy with Carthage. Macedonia had been dominant in Greece, but in 215 BC, Macedonia made a mistake. King Philip V allied with Hannibal during the Second Punic War. Rome remembered. After Hannibal was beaten at Zama in 202 BC, Rome turned east. Philip had been pushing into the Aegean, taking Egyptian territory, threatening Rhodes, threatening Pergamum. Both were Roman allies. In 201 BC, the Rhodians crushed Philip's fleet at the Battle of Chios. 12,000 Macedonians died in that naval disaster. Half his ships gone. Rhodes and Pergamum sent ambassadors to Rome. Philip is expanding. Philip is threatening our cities. Philip needs to be stopped. The Roman Senate listened. War was declared in 200 BC. The first 2 years were skirmishes. Roman commanders probing. Philip holding defensive positions. Then in 198 BC, a new consul arrived in Greece. Titus Quinctius Flamininus, 29 years old, ambitious, fluent in Greek. He'd served as a military tribune under Claudius Marcellus during the war against Hannibal, been quaestor at Tarentum starting in 205 BC, held praetorian command there for 3 years, settled veterans after Scipio Africanus beat Carthage. In 198 he was elected consul, youngest in decades. He got Macedonia as his assignment. Flamininus met Philip late that year, demanded total evacuation of Greece, every garrison, every soldier, even Thessaly, which had been Macedonian since 353 BC for a century and a half. Philip stormed out of the negotiations. War resumed. Flamininus maneuvered, found a trail through the mountains at the Awawas River Gorge, sent troops around Philip's defensive position, hit the Macedonians from behind, 2,000 casualties. Philip retreated to Thessaly. Over winter of 198 and 197, Philip asked for peace. Flamininus stalled. He told his friends in Rome to vote for extending his command if he could finish the war. Vote for peace if they wanted someone else. The Senate kept him in command. War continued. Spring 197 BC. Philip had 25,500 men, 16,000 phalangites with sarissas, 2,000 peltists, 2,000 Thracians, 3,500 southern Greeks and Illyrians as light infantry, 2,000 cavalry, Macedonians and Thessalians. Some of his phalangites were 15-year-old boys added to boost numbers. Philip needed supplies, needed level ground to deploy his phalanx properly. He marched west toward the town of Scotusa in eastern Thessaly, grain stores there. Flamininus had 26,400 men. 16,000 Roman and Italian legionaries, 2,000 light infantry from Crete, Mathemania, and Apollonia, 6,000 Aetolian light infantry, 1,400 Roman and Italian cavalry, 1,000 Aetolian cavalry, 20 war elephants from Africa. He followed Philip. The two armies marched parallel for 3 days, separated by a range of low hills. Neither commander knew exactly where the other was. The hills were called cynocephali, dogs' heads, named for the jagged peaks that looked like canine skulls. Third day. Heavy rain overnight. Morning came with thick fog. Philip broke camp early, started marching. The fog was too dense. Visibility maybe 50 meters. He stopped, pitched camp again, but his men needed food. Half his heavy infantry were out foraging. To cover them, Philip sent his light troops and half his cavalry to occupy the hills. Find the Romans. Flamininus also sent scouts. 1,000 light infantry, 300 cavalry. Reconnaissance mission. They climbed into the fog. At the summit, the two forces collided, blind fighting, hand to hand in the mist. Confused melee. The Macedonians had more men, 1,500 infantry, 1,500 cavalry under an officer named Athenagoras. They pushed the Romans back down the southern slope. Flamininus sent reinforcements, 2,000 light infantry, 500 Aetolian cavalry. The fog started lifting. Around 7 in the morning, Philip could see the hilltops now. His advanced troops were being pressed hard. He sent more men. His remaining cavalry, 1,400 Macedonians and Thessalians, 2,700 light infantry under Athenagoras. They hit the Romans like a hammer, drove them back down the slopes. The Aetolian cavalry barely held the line from collapsing completely. Philip got reports. Romans retreating. Victory on the heights. His officers were shouting, "Push now. Strike while they're running. Commit the Phalanx." Philip hesitated. The ground was terrible. Broken hills, rocky slopes, no place for a Sarissa phalanx. But his men were screaming for battle, some of them 15 years old, desperate to prove themselves. The reports kept coming. Romans fleeing. This is your moment. Philip made the decision. He ordered 8,000 phalangites forward, 4,000 peltasts with them, his right wing. The rest of his phalanx under an officer named Nicanor would follow when they could assemble. Philip himself rode forward, reached the hilltop around 7:45 a.m. The Romans had formed battle lines at the base of the southern slope. Too late to retreat now. Any withdrawal would turn into a massacre. Philip deployed his right wing, formed the peltasts 16 men deep, the phalangites 32 men deep instead of the usual 16, double density, maximum shock power. He gave the order, lower sarissas, advance. If you value documented ancient warfare and verified military history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual using sources from Polybius Histories Book 18, published in the 2nd century BC, who interviewed witnesses and examined battle sites personally, plus Livy's History of Rome Book 33, written within living memory of veterans, plus Plutarch's Life of Flamininus, written in the 1st century AD, drawing on earlier Greek and Roman sources, plus modern archaeological analysis, published in the Journal of Hellenic Studies, Volume 108 from 1988 by N.G.L. Hammond, who identified the battlefield site between the villages of Zoudokos and Chalciades through terrain analysis and artifact surveys. Now back to the information. The Macedonian right wing crashed into the Roman left. The phalanx held formation despite the slope. Momentum carried them forward. The first 5 ranks projected their sarissas beyond the front line, 18 feet of reach. The Romans couldn't get close. The hastati were pushed back, their pila useless. You can't throw javelins when you're retreating. The gladius was too short. An 18-foot pike keeps you 6 meters away from your target. The Macedonian phalanx drove the Roman left wing down the hill. Steady pressure. The interlocking sarissas created a wall of spear points. Behind them, the rear ranks pushed forward, adding weight. The physics worked like this. Each man in the rear ranks pressed on the back of the man in front. 16 rows pushing, even 32 in Philip's dense formation. That collective mass drove the front ranks forward with overwhelming force. The Romans gave ground in good order, fighting withdrawal, shields locked. But they were losing. The slope gave the Macedonians even more advantage, downhill momentum, gravity helping their charge. The Roman left was being crushed. Flamininus saw it. His left was crumbling. If Philip broke through completely, the battle was over. The Macedonian cavalry could sweep around, trap the Roman army, slaughter them from behind. Flamininus made a decision, rode to his right wing, the side that hadn't engaged yet. On the Macedonian left, Nicanor was late. His 8,000 phalangites were still climbing the hills, still in marching column, not deployed for battle, no formation, just a stream of men struggling up rocky slopes carrying 18-foot pikes. Flamininus saw the opening, ordered his right wing to attack. War elephants first. 16 of the 20 African elephants led the charge. Behind them came Roman legionaries, Italian allies, 4,000 Greek infantry. They hit Nicanor's disordered troops like a landslide. The elephants crashed into men who couldn't form a phalanx. Phalangites in column were defenseless. The sarissa is useless when you're not in formation. No room to maneuver, no time to deploy. Individual phalangites tried to lower their pikes. Couldn't. Men behind them were still marching up. Men in front were being trampled by elephants. The whole column compressed. Bodies crushed together. No space to fight. The elephants were massive. African elephants stood 10 to 12 feet at the shoulder, weighed 6 tons. A charging elephant could trample 3 men at once, gore them with tusks. The Macedonians had never trained against elephants, didn't know how to counter them. Panic spread instantly. The Macedonian left broke immediately. Rout. They fled back down the northern slope. Romans and elephants chasing them, cut them down from behind. Nicanor tried to rally his men. Impossible. The formation had never formed. Now both armies were split. Philip was winning on his right, pushing the Roman left downhill. Romans were winning on their right, chasing the Macedonian left. 2 separate battles on opposite sides of the ridge. The outcome hung balanced. Then, an unnamed Roman tribune saw something. He was pursuing the broken Macedonian left when he looked across the ridge. The Macedonian right wing had its back exposed. The phalanx was focused forward, pushing downhill against the Roman left. Nobody protecting the rear. The sarissa phalanx can't turn. It's locked, facing forward. Each man stands 3 feet from his neighbor, 18-foot pikes all pointing the same direction. To turn the formation, you need space, time. Orders from the center. You can't just pivot. The tribune made a decision. Gathered 20 maniples from the Roman right, about 2,400 men. Some sources say 15 maniples, about 2,000 men. Either way, he detached them from the pursuit, turned them around, ran 800 meters across the ridge, hit the Macedonian right wing from behind. The Phalangites never saw them coming. They were pushing forward. Sarissas lowered. Facing Roman infantry in front of them, suddenly Romans appeared at their backs. Gladius range. Shield-to-shield combat. The sarissa is useless in close quarters. It's 18 feet long. You can't swing it. Can't stab with it when someone is 3 feet away. The Phalangites tried to turn. Couldn't. The formation was too tight. Men too close together. Those in the rear ranks didn't have room to face about. The pelt shield was only 2 feet in diameter, covered their upper torso, left legs exposed, backs exposed. The Romans pressed from behind with swords and shields. Each legionary pushed his scutum forward, created space with the shield, stabbed with the gladius. 18 inches of Spanish steel into backs, necks, legs. The Phalangites wore lighter armor than Roman legionaries, linen cuirass, sometimes bronze plates, nothing on their backs. They were never meant to be attacked from behind. The formation assumed threats came from the front. The Roman left in front saw what was happening, counterattacked. Now the Macedonian right was crushed from both sides, front and rear simultaneously. Some Phalangites raised their sarissas vertically, sign of surrender in Macedonian custom. The Romans didn't know that signal, or they ignored it. They kept killing, stabbing into the packed mass of men who couldn't defend themselves. The phalanx disintegrated. Men threw down their pikes, tried to run, couldn't. Too many bodies, too dense. The killing became systematic. Romans moving through the packed Macedonians. Shield up, stab, shield up, stab. No resistance, just slaughter. Philip watched from the hilltop, saw his right wing collapse, saw his left wing already routed, gathered what cavalry he could, fled north, left the field. The killing continued for maybe 20 minutes after he left. Macedonians surrendered. Some were taken prisoner. Many were cut down. The final count from Polybius, writing within a generation of the battle. 8,000 Macedonians dead, 5,000 captured. Roman losses, 700 dead. Some sources say 750. Livy mentions other ancient writers claimed 32,000 Macedonian dead. One writer said 40,000. Polybius called that boundless exaggeration, and Livy agreed Polybius was trustworthy because he examined the battlefield and interviewed survivors. Philip had entered the battle with 25,500 men. He lost 13,000, over half his army. The Romans lost less than 3% of their force. The Aetolians, who were Rome's allies, fell to looting Philip's camp, while the Romans were still hunting survivors. When the Romans returned, they found nothing. The Aetolians had taken everything: coins, armor, supplies, treasure. This caused a rift between Rome and Aetolia that would lead to another war in 191 BC, but that's later. For now, the Second Macedonian War was over. Philip sent envoys to Flamininus, accepted terms, complete terms, everything Rome demanded. The peace treaty was signed in spring 196 BC. Philip had to evacuate all of Greece, every city, every garrison, everything outside Macedonia proper. He had to pay 1,000 talents of silver, 500 immediately, the rest in 10 annual payments of 50 talents each. He had to surrender his entire navy except 5 ships. His army was limited to 5,000 men. No war elephants. He couldn't lead troops beyond his borders without Roman Senate permission. He had to send hostages to Rome. His younger son Demetrius was sent, lived in Rome as a guarantee of Philip's good behavior. At the Isthmian Games in May 196, BC Flamininus made a proclamation. A herald stepped forward in front of thousands of spectators, Greeks from every city, announced that the Roman Senate and Titus Quinctius Flamininus, having conquered King Philip and the Macedonians, restored to freedom, without garrisons, without taxes, the Corinthians, Locrians, Phocians, Euboeans, Achaeans of Thyotis, Magnesians, Thessalians, and Parabians. The crowd erupted. Plutarch wrote they rose to their feet. No one watched the athletic games. Everyone rushed to greet and hail the savior and champion of Greece. The Greeks were jubilant. Freedom from Macedonian control after a century and a half. They didn't understand the fine print. Roman freedom meant client status. It meant obligations. It meant Rome was the ultimate authority, even if there were no garrisons. Within 50 years, Rome would be fighting Greeks again. By 146, BC Corinth would be sacked and Greece would be a Roman province. But in 196, it felt like liberation. Cynocephalae demonstrated something that would be proven again. At Magnesia in 190 BC, when Rome crushed the Seleucids. At Pydna in 168 BC, when Rome destroyed the last Macedonian army. The Phalanx was powerful but inflexible. The legion was adaptable. The Sarissa was devastating on flat ground in perfect formation. But battlefields aren't perfect. Terrain breaks formations. Fog delays deployments. Half your men are foraging when the enemy appears. A tribune sees an opening and takes 20 maniples across a ridge without orders. That's the difference. Roman centurions were trained to use initiative. Each maniple operated semi-independently. The phalanx required perfect coordination from the center. Break the formation, and the individual phalangite was nearly defenseless. He had an 18-foot pike he couldn't use in close combat, and a short dagger as backup. The legionary had a gladius and a 4-foot shield. He could fight alone or in formation. Polybius, who fought in Greek armies before being taken to Rome as a hostage, analyzed this after watching both systems. He wrote that the phalanx is like an animal of invincible strength, as long as it is one body and can keep its shields locked together. But when broken up into parts, each fighting man loses his strength both because of his armament and because his power depends on acting in concert with his comrades. The legion was different. It could break apart. Maniples could turn 90 degrees, advance through gaps, attack from unexpected angles. The second line could relieve the first without disrupting the formation. The third line was a reserve that could be committed anywhere. At Cynocephalae, an unnamed tribune proved this. He saw the opportunity, acted without permission, turned 2,000 men around, crossed 800 meters of broken ground, hit the enemy from behind, won the battle and the war. That level of tactical flexibility didn't exist in the phalanx. The Sarissa itself was the problem. Polybius stated it was 14 cubits long, about 21 feet. Modern reconstructions, based on archaeological finds, suggest 18 to 20 feet was more common. Either way, it required both hands. The peltashield was small, maybe 2 feet in diameter, strapped to the left forearm. The phalangite's armor was lighter than a Roman legionary's, about 40 pounds total compared to 50 for a legionary, but the legionary had a bigger shield, a sword he could use at any range, 2 javelins to throw before contact. The phalanx had reach, but no flexibility. The legion had adaptability. When terrain broke the phalanx, or when an enemy got inside the Sarissa's range, the phalangites were nearly helpless. The design of the Sarissa maximized forward striking power. The first 5 ranks could extend their pikes beyond the front line. That created a barrier 10 to 15 feet deep of spear points, impenetrable from the front. But the weapon's length became a fatal weakness when attacked from any other angle. From the side or rear, a phalangite couldn't bring his Sarissa to bear. The pike needed at least 6 feet of clearance to maneuver. In close combat, that space didn't exist. At Cynocephalae, the critical moment came when the unnamed tribune struck from behind. The sources don't name him. We don't know his family, don't know his career. But his decision won the battle. 20 maniples, 2,000 men. They ran nearly a kilometer across the ridge, came down on the Macedonian right while it was locked in combat facing forward. The phalangites in the rear couldn't turn their 18-foot pikes around. They were standing 3 feet apart, couldn't make room. The formation was too dense. The Romans pushed in with shields and short swords, close quarters butchery. The front ranks of the phalanx were still fighting downhill against the Roman left, didn't know what was happening behind them until the pressure from their own rear ranks stopped. Then it collapsed. Panic spreads faster than orders. Men saw their comrades dying behind them, tried to flee, couldn't, pressed too tight. The Romans understood this. Their manipular system was designed for exactly this kind of fluidity. The training emphasized individual combat skills. Each legionary knew how to fight with shield and sword, knew how to maintain spacing with his comrades, knew how to advance or retreat without waiting for orders from the center. That training saved the Roman left when the Macedonian right was pushing them downhill. They retreated in good order, maintained formation, kept their shields locked, waited for the counterattack. When the tribunes struck the Macedonian rear, they counterattacked immediately, coordinated without orders. That's the difference between the two systems. The legion trained men to think, the phalanx trained men to move in unison. Philip V learned from cynocephaly. After the treaty, he rebuilt Macedonia, reopened mines, minted new currency, restructured his kingdom's finances. He even helped Rome against Sparta in 195 BC and against Antiochus III in 192 to 188 BC. Rome was fighting the Seleucid Empire, the last of the great Hellenistic kingdoms still independent. Philip sent troops, supplies, intelligence about Seleucid tactics. He was proving himself a loyal client. As a reward, Rome remitted his final tribute payments in 190 BC, returned his son Demetrius that same year. Philip had paid 500 talents immediately after cynocephaly, then 50 talents annually for 7 years. That's 850 total. Rome forgave the remaining 150. Demetrius came home after 14 years in Rome, but the damage was done, so the prince had become Roman, spoke Latin better than Greek, quoted Virgil and Homer, discussed Roman law and politics. His older brother Perseus hated him, saw him as a traitor. Philip suspected Demetrius was plotting with Rome to overthrow Perseus and take the throne. Whether that was true doesn't matter. Philip believed it. Around 180 BC, he had Demetrius executed, then spent his last 2 years regretting it. Died in 179 BC, bitter and alone. Perseus inherited, tried to restore Macedonian power, made alliances, reformed the army. The Sarissa phalanx came back, 20,000 men. At Pydna in 168 BC, it met Roman legions again, same result. The Romans found broken ground, lured the phalanx onto it. The formation fractured, gaps opened, Romans poured through, 8,000 Macedonians dead. The legion beat the phalanx again. Every time they fought, the pattern repeated. Flamininus became a legend in Greece. They called him Liberator, erected statues, gave him honors, divine honors in some cities. Greeks worshipped him like a god, the man who freed them from Macedonia. He returned to Rome in 194 BC with a triumph. Paraded through the city, cartloads of Greek art, treasure, armor, weapons, shields taken from temples, statues of Greek gods, bronze, marble, gold. The crowd watched for hours as the spoils rolled past. Demetrius walked in chains behind Flamininus's chariot. Public humiliation of Macedonian power. The crown prince of the kingdom that had ruled Greece for 150 years reduced to a prisoner on display. 13 years old when he was sent to Rome, paraded through the streets like a trophy. The crowds loved it. Rome loved displays of conquered enemies, proof of their growing power. Flamininus was celebrated, given lands, money, political influence. He became censor in 189 BC. The censor was one of Rome's highest offices, controlled the census, determined who could be a senator, who could vote. Flamininus used the position to reward friends, punish enemies. In 183, he was sent as an ambassador to Bithynia. King Prusius II ruled there. Hannibal had taken refuge with him after fleeing from Syria. Rome wanted Hannibal dead. Flamininus demanded extradition. Prusias agreed. Surrounded Hannibal's house with soldiers. Hannibal had poison ready. He'd carried it for years. Knew this day would come. Drank it rather than surrender to Rome. Died in 183 BC. Flamininus went home victorious again. The man who defeated Macedonia and drove Hannibal to suicide. He lived another 9 years. Died in 174 BC at age 55. His career defined the beginning of Roman expansion into the eastern Mediterranean. He'd shown Rome how to control Greece without occupying it, client kings, friendly alliances, cultural propaganda, freedom declared at the Isthmian Games while Rome held all the real power. That model would be used across the Mediterranean for the next century. The Battle of Cynocephalae marked the end of Macedonian dominance. Philip II had created the Sarissa phalanx around 360 BC. His son Alexander used it to conquer the Persian Empire. The Diadochi, his successors, used it to rule the Hellenistic kingdoms. For 160 years, the phalanx was the strongest military formation in the world. Cynocephaly broke it, showed that mass and momentum weren't enough. You needed flexibility. You needed units that could operate independently. You needed officers who could think and act without orders. The Romans had built exactly that system, starting in the Samnite Wars, refined during the Punic Wars, proven at Cynocephalae. The Manipular Legion became the dominant military force for the next 2 centuries until Marius reformed it into cohorts in 107 BC. But the principle remained. Small units, flexible tactics, initiative from below. That's what beat the phalanx. The Manipular Legion had 120 men per maniple, 30 to 35 maniples per legion. That's around 4,000 men total. But each maniple acted independently. Each centurion made decisions, saw opportunities, responded to threats. The phalanx needed orders from the top. Philip, or one of his generals, had to coordinate the entire formation. If communication broke, the Phalanx lost cohesion. At Cynocephalae, communication broke. Philip committed his right wing before Nicanor got his left wing into position. The fog, the terrain, the distance between them, it made coordination impossible. The Roman system didn't have that problem. Each maniple knew what to do. Attack exposed flanks, support engaged units, exploit gaps. The unnamed tribune didn't need orders to strike the Macedonian rear. He saw the opportunity and took it. That's the difference. In 146 BC, Rome sacked Corinth. The city that had hosted the Isthmian Games, where Flamininus declared Greek freedom 50 years earlier, was burned. The population enslaved, every man, woman, and child sold, the city's treasures looted, temples stripped. The ruins left as a warning. Greece became a Roman province, Achaia. The freedom proclaimed in 196 meant nothing by 146. Rome had always been the dominant power. The Greeks just hadn't understood. The declaration at the Isthmian Games was propaganda, brilliant propaganda. It made Roman control acceptable, made it look like liberation. But the substance was always Roman hegemony. Macedonia learned this at Cynocephalae. The Seleucids learned it at Magnesia. The Greeks learned it at Corinth. Rome controlled the eastern Mediterranean. The Phalanx was dead. The legion was supreme. But Cynocephalae remains the clearest example. The day when one system met another and one walked away. 1,600 meters of rocky hills in Thessaly, morning fog, broken terrain. Half of each army engaged before the commanders wanted to fight. Philip committed his phalanx on ground he knew was wrong. Flamininus adapted, used his elephants against disordered infantry, let his officers take initiative. An unnamed tribune saw the exposed Macedonian rear, didn't wait for orders, gathered 20 maniples, ran 800 meters, hit them from behind. The phalanx shattered, 8,000 dead, 5,000 captured, 700 Roman losses. The numbers tell the story. When the formation broke, the phalangites were helpless. When the maniples broke, they reformed and kept fighting. That's the difference. That's why Rome won. That's why the eastern Mediterranean became Roman. Because on a foggy morning in Thessaly in 197 BC, an unnamed tribune made a decision, and the Macedonian phalanx couldn't respond. The battlefield site at Zoudakos in Chalcides holds evidence still. N.G.L. Hammond surveyed the area in the 1980s, published his findings in the Journal of Hellenic Studies in 1988. He found corroded bronze, fragments of iron, bones scattered in the soil, pottery shards dating to the late 3rd, early 2nd century BC. Chemical analysis of the metal showed it matched Macedonian bronze alloys. The iron fragments had patterns consistent with sarissa tips and Roman pilum shanks. The bones were human, scattered across 1,600 meters of hillside. Some showed cut marks, sword strikes. Others showed puncture wounds, stabbing injuries. The physical evidence matches the ancient accounts. The hills where 8,000 Macedonians died, the ridge where 20 maniples ran, dogs' heads, Cynocephalae, the place where the ancient world's balance of power shifted, where Alexander's system met Rome's system, where the sarissa met the gladius, where mass met flexibility. The legion won. Rome rose. The Hellenistic world began its long decline into Roman control. All because of 3 hours of fighting on broken ground. All because a phalanx couldn't turn when attacked from behind. All because one unnamed Roman officer saw an opening and took 20 maniples across a ridge without permission. That decision ended the Second Macedonian War, broke Macedonian power, established Rome as the dominant force in Greece, changed the course of Mediterranean history. The battle demonstrated principles that would govern warfare for centuries. Flexibility beats mass, initiative beats orders, adaptable formations beat rigid ones. These lessons were learned at terrible cost. 13,000 Macedonians lost at Cynocephalae, 700 Romans. The disparity tells the story. When the systems clashed, the flexible one survived. The rigid one shattered. Philip survived the battle but lost his kingdom's power. Flamininus won the battle and launched Rome's Eastern Empire. The unnamed tribune won immortality through his actions, even though his name was lost. Polybius preserved the story. Livy confirmed it. Plutarch elaborated. Modern archaeology validates it. The battle happened. The phalanx broke. The legion won. That's the truth. That's what the evidence shows. That's what happened on a foggy morning in spring 197 BC in the hills of Thessaly, when 25,000 Romans destroyed the military might of 40,000 Macedonians and ended forever the dominance of the sarissa phalanx that had ruled battlefields for 160 years since Philip II forged it in the mountains of Macedonia. If you value documented ancient warfare and factual military analysis, subscribe to support this work. Comment what city you're watching from. The research continues. The aftermath of Cynocephalae rippled across the Mediterranean for decades. Every Hellenistic kingdom watched. Every Greek city noted the outcome. The unbeatable phalanx had been beaten, not by another phalanx, not by cavalry or elephants alone, by Roman legionaries with short swords and tactical flexibility, That realization changed everything. Antiochus III in Syria saw it. He'd been expanding his empire, taking territory from Egypt, building his army, 40,000 infantry, 12,000 cavalry, 54 war elephants. His infantry included phalangites, 16,000 of them with sarissas. He thought he could challenge Rome, thought the phalanx would hold. In 191 BC, war started. The Romans came east, met Antiochus at Magnesia in 190 BC. The phalanx held at first. Then the Roman cavalry broke through on the flanks, circled behind. The pattern repeated. Attack from the rear. The phalanx collapsed. 50,000 Seleucids dead. The Romans lost 300. The legion won again. Perseus of Macedonia learned nothing from history. After his father Philip died in 179 BC, Perseus rebuilt the army. 21,000 phalangites. Trained them on the plains of Macedonia. Drilled them until the formation was perfect. In 171 BC, Rome declared war, the Third Macedonian War. It lasted 3 years. Skirmishes, maneuvers. Then in 168 BC, at Pydna, the armies met. Perseus had 44,000 men. Lucius Aemilius Paulus commanded Rome's 40,000. The phalanx advanced, pushed the Romans back initially. Then the ground changed. Rocky terrain. The formation broke. Gaps opened. Roman maniples poured through, attacked the phalanx from inside. Close combat. Gladius against Sarissa. The Sarissa lost. 8,000 Macedonians dead in 20 minutes. Perseus fled, was captured, paraded through Rome in chains. The Antigonid dynasty ended. Macedonia was divided into 4 republics, client states of Rome. 300,000 Macedonians were enslaved. The Macedonian kingdom that Alexander built, that ruled from Pella to Babylon, that created the Hellenistic world. Gone, destroyed. Because at Pydna, just like at Cynocephalae, the phalanx couldn't adapt when the ground broke. The tactical lessons from Cynocephalae were studied by Roman commanders for generations. How to break a phalanx became standard doctrine. Find rough terrain, lure them onto it, wait for gaps, exploit with maniples, attack from multiple angles, use elephants against disordered formations, maintain flexibility above all else. These principles were taught to every tribune, every centurion, every legionary. The Roman military system evolved, but the core remained. Small units, independent action, tactical flexibility. When Marius reformed the legion in 107 BC, he changed from maniples to cohorts, bigger units, 480 men per cohort, 6 cohorts per legion. But the principle stayed. Each cohort could operate independently. Each centurion had authority. The checkerboard became a line, but the flexibility remained. And when Caesar conquered Gaul from 58 to 50 BC, he used cohort legions, 10 cohorts per legion, 60 centuries per legion, each century led by a centurion. That system came from the Manipular Legion, which came from the Samnite Wars, which was proven at Cynocephalae. The tactical evolution traces back to that foggy morning in 197 BC. The phalanx survived in limited use. Some Hellenistic kingdoms kept pike units, the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids until Magnesia, local armies in Asia Minor, but it was never dominant again, never feared like it had been under Alexander, never unbeatable like Philip II made it. The Sarissa was relegated to ceremonial units, palace guards. The real fighting was done by Roman-style infantry, short swords, large shields, flexible formations. By the time Augustus became emperor in 27 BC, the phalanx was a relic, a historical curiosity. Museums displayed captured sarissas. Old men told stories about when the phalanx ruled, but the reality was clear. The legion had replaced it. Roman tactical doctrine dominated. That dominance lasted 500 years, until the Western Roman Empire fell in 476 AD. Even then, the Eastern Roman Empire continued. Byzantine armies used modified legion tactics, smaller units, heavy infantry, tactical flexibility. The principles from Cynocephalae echoed for a millennium. The unnamed tribune who struck the decisive blow at Cynocephalae represents something important: individual initiative, personal courage, quick thinking. These qualities won the battle more than numbers or equipment. Rome cultivated them systematically. Centurions were promoted from the ranks, men who showed leadership in combat, who made smart decisions under pressure, who could command maniples independently. That's why the tribune could act without orders. He'd been trained to see opportunities, trained to take initiative, trained to lead. The Macedonian system didn't work that way. Officers were appointed by the king, often nobles, sometimes qualified, sometimes not. They followed orders, didn't improvise. The phalanx required obedience, not creativity. That worked when everything went according to plan, failed when it didn't. At Cynocephalae, nothing went according to plan. The fog, the surprise contact, the broken terrain, Philip's late deployment, Nicanor's delay, every factor worked against the phalanx. The rigid system couldn't compensate. The Romans adapted. That adaptability came from training, from culture, from military doctrine. It was systematic, intentional, the product of 2 centuries of warfare against diverse enemies. The legion was forged in conflict, refined through defeat, perfected through victory. By 197 BC, it was the finest military machine in the ancient world. Cynocephali proved it. The battle's impact on Greek culture was profound. For 150 years, the Greeks had lived under Macedonian hegemony. Philip II, Alexander, the Diadochi, the Antigonids, Macedonian kings controlled Greek politics, garrisoned Greek cities, taxed Greek trade. The Greeks resented it, but accepted it. Macedonia had the Phalanx. The Phalanx was unbeatable. Challenging it was suicide. Then Rome came, beat the Phalanx at Cynocephali, declared Greek freedom at the Isthmian Games. The Greeks celebrated, built temples to Roma, honored Flamininus as a liberator. But the reality was darker. Roman freedom meant Roman control, just indirect, subtle. The Greeks had traded one master for another. 50 years later, they realized it, tried to resist, failed. Corinth burned in 146 BC. The Achaean League destroyed. Greece became a province. The freedom Flamininus promised evaporated. But in 196, it felt real. That's the power of propaganda. Rome understood it, used it brilliantly, defeated enemies, made them grateful. That's genius. That's how you build an empire, not just through military power, through cultural manipulation. Rome did both. Beat Macedonia militarily, controlled Greece culturally. The combination was unstoppable. The physical evidence from Cynocephali tells the story in metal and bone. The artifacts Hammond found in his 1980s survey came from the hilltops, the ridge where the battle happened, corroded bronze peltae shields, fragmented sarissa tips, bent pilum shanks, broken gladius blades, Roman scutum fittings, Macedonian helmet pieces, all mixed together in the soil, concentrated along 1,600 meters of ridge. That's where the fighting happened. That's where men died. The bone scatter matches the artifact pattern. Highest concentration at the eastern end. That's where the Macedonian right wing collapsed, where the tribune struck from behind, where 8,000 men died in close combat. The bones show trauma. Cut marks from swords, puncture wounds from stabbing, blunt force trauma from shields. The injuries cluster on backs and sides, not fronts. That confirms the sources. The Macedonians were attacked from behind, couldn't defend themselves, or cut down from directions their formation couldn't face. The evidence supports Polybius, confirms Livy, validates Plutarch. This isn't myth, it's history, documented, verified, real. The tactical situation at Cynocephali was chaotic from the start. Neither commander wanted to fight that day. Philip needed level ground, time to deploy properly, full army assembled. He got none of those. Flamininus wanted better intelligence, clear sight lines, coordinated attack. He got fog and surprise contact. Both armies were forced into battle by their advanced troops. Once committed, neither could withdraw. The engagement escalated from reconnaissance to full battle in 90 minutes. That's fast. Normally, ancient battles took hours to develop. Commanders positioned forces, deployed deliberately, sent ultimatums, sometimes negotiated before fighting. Cynocephali was different. In counter-battle, troops collided in fog, more forces fed in piecemeal. By the time Philip arrived, his men were already engaged. He had to commit or let them be destroyed. He chose to commit. Wrong ground, wrong timing, right wing only. He ordered the attack, hoping Nicanor would arrive in time. Nicanor didn't. The left wing was still climbing when the Romans attacked. That delay was fatal. The legion exploited it. Standard Roman doctrine, hit where the enemy is weak. That's what Flamininus did. Elephants and maniples against disordered Macedonians. It worked perfectly. The elephant charge at Cynocephali was devastating. 16 African elephants crashed into Nicanor's column. Each elephant weighed 6 tons, stood 3 meters tall, had tusks 2 meters long. They were trained for war, conditioned to charge into formations, trained to trample and gore. The Macedonians had no counter. Sarissas were too long and unwieldy to stop a charging elephant. You needed space to set the pike, time to brace. Coordination with the men beside you. Nicanor's troops had none of those. They were in marching column, single file up rocky slopes. When the elephants hit, they couldn't form up, couldn't deploy. Individual phalangites tried to lower their sarissas. The elephant just pushed through, knocked men aside, trampled them. The psychological impact was enormous. Elephants terrified troops who'd never seen them. The smell, the size, the trumpeting roar. Men broke and ran before contact. That's what happened at Cynocephali. The Macedonian left routed, fled down the hills. Romans and elephants pursued, killed hundreds. The rout happened in minutes, maybe 15 minutes from first contact to complete collapse. That's how fast battles turn. One moment you're advancing, next moment you're running for your life. No middle ground, victory or death. That's war. The social structure of the Roman legion contributed to its effectiveness. Soldiers were citizens, property owners, men with stakes in Rome's success. They fought for the Republic, for their families, for their farms. That motivation made them resilient. They could take casualties and keep fighting. At Cynocephaly, the Roman left was pushed back by Philip's phalanx, losing ground, taking casualties. But they didn't break, didn't rout, maintained formation, fought in good order, waited for the counterattack. When the tribunes struck the Macedonian rear, the Roman left immediately turned the momentum, pushed back, attacked. That resilience came from training and motivation. The Macedonians were different. Some were Macedonian citizens, professional soldiers, but many were mercenaries, Greeks, Thracians, Illyrians. They fought for pay, not for Macedonia. When the formation broke, they ran. No reason to die for Philip's kingdom, no loyalty beyond the paycheck. That difference mattered. Roman armies could absorb punishment, Macedonian armies couldn't. When things went wrong, Romans adapted, Macedonians collapsed. That pattern repeated across every Roman-Macedonian battle. Cynocephali, Pydna, even at Aos in 198 BC. Same result every time. Roman resilience beat Macedonian brittleness. The Battle of Cynocephali changed how Rome viewed itself. Before the Second Macedonian War, Rome was primarily a Western power, controlled Italy, defeated Carthage, dominated the Western Mediterranean. The East was foreign, Greek kingdoms, old Alexander's empire, different culture, different politics. Rome had stayed out, but after Cynocephalae, Rome saw itself as Mediterranean hegemon, not just Western power, universal power. They'd beaten Macedonia, the kingdom that conquered the Persian Empire, that made Rome greater than Persia, greater than Alexander. That's how Romans thought. Defeating the best meant you became the best. After 197 BC, Roman ambitions expanded. Syria, Egypt, Anatolia, all became targets. Within 50 years, Rome controlled them all. The Eastern Mediterranean was Roman. That expansion started at Cynocephalae. One battle, one day, one unnamed tribune. Changed the balance of power for centuries. That's the nature of decisive battles. They don't just decide wars, they decide eras. Cynocephalae was decisive. The most decisive battle of the Second Macedonian War. One of the most decisive battles in ancient history. 25,000 Romans destroyed 40,000 Macedonians. The phalanx broke. The legion rose. Rome became the Mediterranean's dominant power. All on a foggy morning in spring 197 BC on broken ground in Thessaly at a place called Dogs' Heads.